This is Jamie Drummond for Good Food Revolution. We are here with Chef Chris McDonald and we're going to be looking at some Serrano ham and what we can do to that Serrano ham with the correct implements, namely a Wüsthof carving knife from the classic Ikon range. Chris, how are you?
I'm well, thank you, Jamie.
Superb. And what do we have in front of us here? I've never had so much ham in my kitchen before.
Well, we're going to ham it up today, I guess. We have two pieces of jamón serrano.
Yes.
One that I'm going to show you how to open and start, and then one that is halfway finished, so we can talk about how to keep slicing.
Superb. So what kind of knife would one be looking at using for this particular operation?
You need a firm slicing knife.
Okay.
So some knives that are called ham slicers are actually quite flexible.
Right.
You don't want a flexible knife for
Now,
this.
why wouldn't you be wanting a flexible knife? Something that was too flexible?
Because the ham itself is very hard. Jamón.
Right. Yes, yeah.
Ham is very hard, is very firm, and you need a firm knife to go against it.
Right, I understand.
You need one at least this long. This one is about 9 inches long, the blade. You can have one a bit longer, is good too.
I have to ask you, we're looking at Serrano ham today. What other kind of hams do you normally mess about with?
Well, there are sort of two categories of ham from Spain, but globally there is, in Portugal they have presunto, which is again this unsmoked dry cured ham, and in France they have Bayonne ham, and then of course in Italy they have prosciutto from various regions. The two categories of hams that come from Spain are Serrano. So jamón serrano just means mountain ham. It's a very generic term. And then there's jamón ibérico, which is a breed of pig that comes, well, it's a indigenous breed from Spain, and the animals grow very large and get very fat, and consequently the legs are very large and very well marbled. And very expensive.
I see. So let's get started on this ham here, this first ham. You're going to be opening this one up, I believe.
So yes, so this one, we're going to call it opening the ham. Now it's in a stand here. This is a very fancy stand by a company called Spethman, which is one of the producers of ham. Many of these producers produce both Iberico and Serrano. This particular ham is from a company called Fuente. And so there is, before we begin, there's a bone. This is just a leg of pork. So there's a bone through the middle. Then there's a ball and socket joint here, which you can see on this ham. And so you're always working around the bones.
Right. Typically,
the prosciutto you see is cured. The final curing stage is done boneless, so you can put it on a meat slicer.
Yes.
These, traditionally in Spain, although you can get it pre-sliced, traditionally they're cured on the bone. So you can't put it on a slicer because the bone gets in the way.
I understand.
That's why you need to know how to do this. So the bone is not right in the center. Just like our legs, there's more muscle on one side and less muscle on the other. So there is what I'll call the top side, which is generally the side you start with, which is it's called the masa, which means the more massive side, and then the contramasa is the smaller part on the bottom. Now we can talk later about how you choose which one to start with, but generally you start with the masa. So that means that when the ham goes in the stand, the trotter is facing, the back of the trotter is facing towards you, if that makes sense. So here, that's how we have this here. And it's tightened in with a screw that's a spike that goes into the leg. Now, there is, as you can see here, there's rind. There's the pork rind here. It's been cut away at this point here. And then this is just fat. Now, the orange indicate some oxidation, so you're not ever eating the orange fat. We're going to make one cut here that's fairly deep, just to open up the ham. I'm going to follow a little bit the contour of the ham, to get one big slice, because we're going to use this piece later to, when we put the ham to bed for the night, we take this piece of fat and we put it on the ham to cover it, to keep it from drying out. You can also use it, because it's covered in fat, you can also use it to sort of oil up the ham, grease up the ham if you will, which tends to seal the pores and keep it from dehydrating. And then you'll put it here. So I'm going to make a few big cuts like this, so I have a couple of large pieces that I can use when it's time to put the ham to bed.
As you're doing that, I'll ask you, can you remember the first time that you had ham of this caliber?
Well, the first time I had a ham like this, that I had to deal with it, was when we opened Cava 10 years ago.
Oh, really?
And of course I'd had it in Spain before, but I'd never cut one. And so I had a friend of mine, a Spanish friend of mine, come and show me how to do this. And there's certainly a learning curve. So I've got a couple of big slices off, and I'm going to keep those aside. Now I'm just going to trim away rind and yellow bits so that I have a kind of a landing strip that I can start slicing ham.
Right.
Now the yellow stuff is not really good for anything, but if you wanted to take the time, you could cut off the white fat here, for instance, and you could use that in terrines, or you could render it, fry eggs in it. It's tasty stuff.
Right, but all of that orange or yellow stuff is all oxidized.
That's right.
No use.
Well, there's rind here, and then there's fat that's oxidized.
Right. Once one opens up one of these hams, what kind of shelf life does it have?
I would say about a month. You have to put it, to bed properly, as I was demonstrating earlier, and you should keep it in a cool place. It doesn't have to be refrigerated, but if you have a root cellar or a cool spot in your house, or wine cellar, for instance, then you would keep it in there in between uses, and just leave it on the stand. You move the whole stand plus the ham into a cooler environment. Okay, so this ham is now ready for the first slices. So you're going to come across. I'm right-handed. It would be the same process if you're left-handed, and you take off slices. Now the difference between this and prosciutto, firstly, you're never going to slice it as thinly as a meat slicer can slice prosciutto. And also, as you know, on a prosciutto, you're slicing across the grain. Here you're slicing with the grain. There is a culture in Spain of having small pieces, so little chips, not the big long slices that you see typically of prosciutto. And it's a little bit chewier for being sliced with the grain. You can see the grain running through like wood, than prosciutto. And because the irregularity of hand slicing gives a bit more texture as well. So the trick here is that you want to keep everything flat, flat, flat. There is a tendency, because of the way the ham cures, that as you go along, you end up with a sort of a half pipe of ham, which is not desirable. You'll end up with a lot of waste.
Did you ever have a few disasters doing this on your first few attempts?
You always do. Well, you just end up with the half pipe. And every time we train somebody up on this at the restaurant, there needs to be some vigilance until they get used to it. Now, there's a pretty slice right there. So once you keep going, you have a really pretty plate of ham. I can feel it starting to get firm here. That's when you have to bear down to keep it flat, because your knife will want to make the half pipe. You can buy these whole hams, and if you want just a smaller quantity, you can get pre-sliced ham from a website called Lola and Miguel.com, and it's a mail order site, so it will be delivered to your door. They have lots of other fun things like anchovies and so forth. Beautiful Spanish anchovies. Another thing is that you'll end up having to do sort of a backhanded from time to time. I didn't need to there, but I'm just showing you that that you end up having to do some backhanded strokes, which is kind of foreign for a cook to do. And it's not, of course, dangerous. It's just a little unusual. So the ham goes all the way up into the shank. And I can probably demonstrate this better on the ham that's already been cut into, but I'll keep doing this for now. So you need to make a space so you can see how it's well marbled. So this you might cut off the rind and dice and put in a pasta or something like that. But the meat up here is quite beautiful as well. It has a different taste. It's richer, just like shank meat. Also, buco has a richer taste. And a little fattier. There's not much of it. Once I cut down further through this ham, I'll have better access to the more shanky meat. So here's a ham that's been open for a while. You can see it's a little darker. It's dried out a bit and it's darkened a bit. Still fine. It has the right texture. And here's your femur, your pelvic bone coming through, your ball and socket. So you have to cut around, you have to work around this, and you keep going. And then here you can see that when you get up in here, you get these lovely, more cured, because the diameter is so narrow, the meat cures faster, so this meat's always more firm and a little drier, but it has lovely intense flavor. When you're done this, you would then flip this ham over. And then you would proceed to open the back side of it. Again, some nice fat to use for your rendering. And now you have the smaller portion, the contramassa, and you'll get thinner slices of meat that tends to be a little firmer because, of course, this side is smaller, so the salt in the curing and the drying will make this drier quicker. So if you have a ham that is, if you start into it and find or believe that it's going to be quite soft, it's better to start with the contramassa. You can cut into this, and then once it's open, the ham will start drying some more. So if you're using this at home, you might have a couple of days where you're cutting your jamón from the contramassa, and then when you're ready, you can flip it over, and the bigger, meatier side will have dried out a little bit.
Right. So there we have it. Lovely plate of ham. Now, Chris, what do you normally have as a tipple when you're enjoying some good ham like this?
Well, the best thing to have, of course, is some sherry. So a dry sherry, either Fino or Manzanilla. This one happens to be Manzanilla. So
excellent.
Jamie and I are going to sit down now and eat some of the spoils of our labor and have a glass of Manzanilla.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Chris.
You're
Cheers.
welcome.